What's up? Welcome to this morning's webinar. We're going to get started in just 2 seconds here. So buckle up. Today, we're going to be talking specifically about ChatGPT in the workplace, as far as how to think about it, how to create policies around it, and more importantly, how to do more than just create policies around it. I think that's probably the number one misconception I've heard over the past, maybe about 8 months since I've been talking about it, talking at SHRM events, to business owners, business executives, HR people, you name it. I think there's just a huge misconception about what we should do and what the next steps are and how to go about doing it. And so today, my primary goal is to clear up some of that, to give you the right way to think about it, the right paradigm, the right kind of frame to frame in what is going to happen over the next 1 to 5 years that's going to completely revolutionize the way that we work, specifically, especially in white collar jobs, administrative jobs, but quite literally any interactions between humans, whether that's a customer interaction with an employee, whether that is HR's interaction with a job seeker, anything like that. The biggest known about generative AI is this ability to sit in the middle to make that conversation more engaging, to make it easier to create the content for the conversation, to make it more personalized, those types of things. Regardless of what you've heard about AI, from the outlandish stuff, it's going to replace all the workers, it's going to, make HR, obsolete, whatever the case may be, or the downside that it's going to end the world and take over and whatever. Those things we're going to talk about, but specifically when we talk about the actual likely scenarios, the scenarios that I can guarantee will happen because they're already happening, is this middle ground of assisting our employees to engage with or with their back and forth communication, whether that's one-to-many in marketing, whether it's one-to-one in sales, whether it's one-to-many in recruiting or one-to-one in recruiting, whether it's team communication or brainstorming, whether it's creating emails for your team, or anything like that, anywhere that we are creating content, typing more than 20 words is the way I like to put it. I can guarantee it will massively disrupt those types of processes, those types of situations in the next 1 to 5 years, period, full stop, regardless of what else AI does. And so that's going to be our primary focus today, is not just how to create a policy, but how to actually think through, and make it a more pragmatic approach, to make it a more evolutionary approach, that it will evolve as things change, as AI adjusts, as it matures, our policy will mature. And that's probably the best way to think about it. Your policies, your procedures, should match the maturity of the technology that you're approaching. So we're going to jump right in and kind of talk about that. But first, I figured I'd introduce myself. If you don't know who I am, I'd love to hear who you are. Jump into the chat, throw in your name, the industry you're in, the size of company. I'd love to hear it. Or if you have any questions, just like at the top of your brain of, man, I sure hope that today, by the end of this session, XYZ has been accomplished. Please feel free, throw it in the chat. The chat will be live the whole time. I can see it on my screen. And so, Express Employment Professionals. Great, Renee. A whole lot of content going on there because you do so much recruiting. So let me tell you a little bit about my backstory. So I got an accounting degree and an MBA, and I was doing accounting work when I quit my job and went into web marketing. This was over 2 decades ago. And the web marketing world in the early days was very analytical. It wasn't like the create TV commercials. It wasn't like that at all. We weren't marketing iPhones. We were doing very analytical-based search engine marketing. But about 17 years ago, somebody asked me to build an applicant tracking system. I'm not a programmer. I had a team of programmers. Actually, I had one part-time mom at that point who was doing program for me, and we built an applicant tracking system, a piece of hiring software. And over the last 17 years, I bootstrapped that company from that one part-time employee to 300 employees, 10,000 clients, over 130, probably 150 million in total revenue at this point. 10 years in a row on the Inc. 5000 list. The most important thing about this growth story, though, is that this was all bootstrapped against very, very big competitors. This is David versus Goliath type scenario. I used literally a couple $1,000 a month out of my pocket that I was getting from a full-time job to launch this business, and that's the only money that's been put into it to this point. We currently manage, Applicant Pro manages, like I said, over 10,000 clients, job listings and job distribution and applicant tracking and career sites and all that kind of stuff. I also have a little side company called Refer that does the opposite, that helps job seekers get jobs. It's generally about the number 3 or number 4 source of applicants from job boards for those clients. We've sent over 2 billion emails. Just let that one sit in for a minute. And so the real story, though, of my evolution at Applicant Pro, or my growth story there before I left about a year ago, was this constant evolution of optimizing our policies, our procedures, and our processes for how we could automate or amplify around human-to-human touch points. That really, if you want to sum the whole thing up, how we did marketing, how we did sales, how we did new client onboarding, how we did support and success, and all of those pieces had to do with our ability to run an insanely efficient operation, but without harming the human element of what was going on. And that really is that, we can create very efficient organizations regardless of what you do, regardless of whether you're in recruiting or whether you're in performance, regardless of whether you're in sales or marketing. We can create very efficient organizations, and generally that comes at the cost of customer experience or job seeker experience or employee experience. It's a little bit more difficult when we try to create efficiency while also creating effectiveness, meaning that it actually works. Just because you can do something fast doesn't mean you did it the right way, and you may end up going really fast but making a lot of errors or mistakes. The third E from that, though, that really is the secret sauce is, can you make it more engaging? And so those are the 3 E's that we focused on at Applicant Pro. Can we be insanely efficient in our processes? But can we make sure we focus on the end goal, being very effective? But most importantly, that human element, which is super interesting to be talking about, but it needs to be talked about anytime we talk about AI, we need to talk about it even more. Our goal is not to take out the human element. Our goal is to automate around or create leverage for our employees around those human touch points without taking the human feel out of it. And we did that with all types of different technologies. And about 9 months ago, when I left Applicant Pro and went on kind of sabbatical, I stepped down. I still own the company, but or own part of it, but I'm no longer the CEO. For the last, almost year, I'm probably about 3,000 hours in ChatGPT. And that time, I'm not kidding, 3,000 hours is probably an understatement, of this one simple question: how would I use this to do my job if fill in the blank? And so if I was an HR person who was doing recruiting, if I was an HR person who was doing onboarding, if I was an HR person, if I was an executive at a company wanting to communicate my vision with my team, if I was a marketer back at Applicant Pro trying to create, we at Applicant Pro, when I left, we were sending, probably a million emails a week on the marketing side of things, but that was divided up into 20 different niches, 20 different variations, all that kind of stuff. It was a huge content requirement. Our sales team had a huge content requirement. And so for the last year, that's effectively what I've done, is just take and put on a different hat each day. Okay, today I'm going to put on my HR hat. If I was trying to inspire my management team to approach our culture and our values a certain way, how would I use ChatGPT to help me be more efficient, more effective, and again, the top one, more engaging? And whether that's ChatGPT or Bard or any type of generative AI, and that is one of the big questions that comes up that I believe is, to be honest, a distraction, is, well, which AI is better? Just today, we're not going to talk about ChatGPT versus Bard versus whatever else is coming out. they all work effectively the same way. They all have the same potential, and your approach to them needs to be the same exact way. And so that really is the goal. We may not actually even touch ChatGPT today until the end, unless you want to poke around in it, but it's more of the mindset and the frame that you're using to think this through. So I gotta get my slides working the right way here. There we go. So here's the number one thing if you have, I don't know, not had your head in the sand for the last year, is that there is a massive amount of news out there about ChatGPT, specifically how it's going to change the job market, the workforce, how companies do their job, interactions. This one right here, 300 million jobs could be affected by the latest wave of AI. Just stop and think about this. 300 million jobs. That would be almost every job in the US. Let it sink in. Now, it doesn't say could be displaced. It doesn't say could be laid off. It says could be affected. Affected could be a positive effect or a negative effect. It's just saying it could be affected. The number one takeaway from this should be we can't just put our head in the sand here. Like, the wait and see is not an option. And there's a couple main reasons for it. Number one is that it is coming so fast, and AI is we call it a cycle time in the tech world. The cycle of innovation or evolution or iteration in AI is probably 10 times faster than the cycle was with, say, the internet or email or mobile or texting or any of those things. So those technologies took maybe 7 years or 10 years to ramp up and get to wide distribution. And that simply is not how AI will work. It's going to be much, much faster. It's going to have a dramatic impact. Think about the impact of email, the impact of the internet, the impact of Google on our teams, on our workforce. Think about that impact of what happened in the last, say, 20 years, at least while I've been in this space. Life looks completely different today at work than it looked 20 years ago. Now imagine if we'd made all those changes in 3 years. The level of evolution that rapidly requires a focus and a lot more like deliberate focus. But what you most likely see from the news is what I call hype or hate. And we're going to talk about what this is, but effectively all new technologies, whether it's the car, the train, switching from kerosene to electricity, all the way up through to where we're at today with AI or blockchain or NFTs or the internet, email, all of them go through the same exact cycle. Now, as the average person who's not in tech, if you're a little more skeptical, if you're in the more later stage adopting roles, you might say, why can't we just get rid of this cycle? Why do we have to go through the roller coaster that is new technology? The fact of the matter is, this is just how it is. This is a force of nature. It is a pattern that appears in all disruptive technology. It appears no matter what. And so let me explain it, because since it's something that happens no matter what we go through this roller coaster, the number one thing is for you to understand that this is what it is. Number two goal is to understand why. And so this is how it works. If you think about it, this is kind of a cartoonish way to do it, but it's the easiest way to lighten the mood here. All new technology is created by geeks, whether that's a scientist, an engineer, a programmer, whatever the case may be, whether they're working in a college lab, whether they're doing this as part of, their education, whether they're doing it in their basement or garage, or it's done at DARPA and it's some big governmental experience. Somebody is a geek who's trying to solve a problem, not a business problem normally, just a problem. Either they're trying to figure out the opportunities that are out there for a piece of technology or something along those lines. At some point, they strike gold is probably the best way to think about it. They hit a gusher, they drill and hit oil. They hit a point where they say, hey, this is doing something amazing. And at that point, they normally need two things. They need help, meaning more scientists like them, more geeks, and money. And those two things are kind of together, right? They need money and geeks. And so at that point, we kind of start into this hype cycle. And it's really quite simple. As a scientist or as a creator, I'm a creator, I create software or whatever. Like I pride myself in the ability to see the world as an oyster, as full of opportunities. That doesn't mean all of them will come true, and it doesn't mean all of them should come true, or it doesn't mean all of them are realistic. But in order to create something new, to be a Steve Jobs or an Elon Musk or all of those guys, Thomas Edison, you have to have this belief that there's amazing opportunity in the future. And when you have that belief, that vision of what the future could be, not what it will be, but what it could be, you start to talk about it in order to gain more help, more people who want to help you with it, and more money to pay for those people, or to pay for the tools that are required, or the technology that's required, or whatever the case may be. It's going to require funds and people to do something like that. And so that means you go out in the world and you start talking about all the amazing possibilities of the future. It creates a bunch of hype. It creates excitement of people who want to be involved. It creates excitement of first movers and tech adopters who want to be on the leading edge of stuff. It creates excitement in younger kids coming up through school about what the future might be like. We love the concept of what the future could be. It also creates excitement among venture capitalists and people who want to make money off of betting on the future. Now, the problem with it is all of this hype that's required in talking about what it could be is heard by the media and the rest of the world as maybe more promises than just ideas. And at some point, we reach this cap where it starts to reach, we start to see that the expectations were inflated. We were told that the cars would be driving themselves today already. We wouldn't need steering wheels. Can cars drive themselves today? Yeah. Are they very good at it? Not always. Do they have steering wheels? You better hope they do, because I have to take over my autopilot all the time around town. But that inflated expectation happened not because they're liars, not because they're snake oil salesmen, but because what they were talking about is what could be the future at some point in time if it works and if it makes logical sense. Now, as that stuff starts to be used in real world practice, that's where this disillusionment starts coming down. We start to apply a theory, an idea, something that worked in the lab. We take it out of the lab, and we put it in real life, and all of a sudden it starts to not work the way we wanted it to work, or the way that we assumed it would work based off those promises, and it brings us crashing down, right? You might see this right now in the negative news about ChatGPT, where, well, it's inaccurate. Well, a lawyer used it and it made up its own case law. Well, whoever it made up its own facts. It echoed, or I don't know what they're calling it right now. It was inaccurate, or, oh my gosh, we don't know about what kind of information is going in it. There are stories of, it was super interesting. A lawyer actually quoted in her presentation the other day about the lack of security around ChatGPT, and the evidence of it was there are stories about. Just think about that right there. That is not evidence. That is rumor. But that is how it goes. And so we see this. Now, if it is a valid technology, and so the one question you have to ask yourself is generative AI not, you could use this with normal AI, but today we're talking specifically about generative AI, meaning ChatGPT, Bard, meaning the ability for me to go in and have it help me write something, have it help me brainstorm something, have it help me do something like that. Is it going to be massively powerful in the future? And I don't think anybody could say no. If it wasn't going to be, you wouldn't hear so much hate and you wouldn't hear so much hype. And you can measure its potential based off that. Just think back to the cell phone, think back to the internet, think back to email. You heard the same hype and hate. And so we know we're going to end up over here. The question is, how much money and time are you going to waste on the hype, or how much worry and stress are you going to get from the downside hate? So the best way to think about it right off the bat is you need to start thinking not what is being said, but who is saying it. And so as you're reading the news, as you're hearing something, I have really three main questions for it. Question number one, from anybody that I hear anything about ChatGPT, is going to be, have you used it? At what level have you used ChatGPT? So if somebody comes to me and says, oh my gosh, ChatGPT is going to be the new wave of the future, and I say, have you used it? And they go, well, no, I've logged into it like for 10 minutes. Well, if it's so freaking amazing, why aren't you using it? Right? That's going to be my number one question. Have you tried it doing what you're talking about? No, I haven't tried it. Why not? And so that cuts through a lot of the hype right there. If what somebody's telling me it can do, they haven't tried doing it with it, there's virtually no excuse for that because it would take me 5 minutes. You could literally in our chat here throw any idea at me, and in 5 minutes live on this webinar, I could go and start testing and see if it could do that. So therefore, if somebody is giving you hype, but they aren't actually trying to do it, then you have to reduce the credibility of that hype, right? That doesn't mean that it may not happen. It just means that the likelihood of it happening, if it's more than just a rumor, a story, a potential, a daydream, something like that, like you need to dismiss and not buy into it. I'm not going to invest money in an idea that comes from somebody who has never tried it. Make sense? Number two would be think about where the hate's coming from, right? And again, hate comes from those who have the most to lose when the status quo is attacked. That could be teachers, it could be journalists, it could be lawyers, it could be anybody. Whoever has the most to lose from the status quo being attacked is going to have the most hate to say. It doesn't mean that what they're worried about isn't valid. It doesn't mean that what they're worried about couldn't be a potential. But for you, you have to look at it and ask yourself on the downside, number one, is there anything that I could do to stop it? Like this negativity of like, well, it might happen. Is there anything I could do to reduce my personal or our business risk if this is true? If the answer is no, then there's no need to worry about it. There's nothing you can do about it. If the answer is yes, then you say, well, can we put some safeguards in place to make sure that that isn't a big deal while they figure it out? Because trust me, all of this hype stuff, all of the hype is going to be validated as either viable or not viable. And all of the hate is going to be validated as either fear or real. Fear, we'll call it fear or a threat, right? Threat, it actually is real. Fear, hey, it's just something that we're worried about. All those things are going to be validated out. My goal as a business is to navigate my way through this without the highs and without the lows. That's literally my goal as an individual. It's my goal as an individual employee, as an employer, as a worker, as whatever the case may be. My goal is not to put my head in the sand and freak out and say, we won't touch anything, lock everybody out, because that has its own risk factor. It's actually the biggest risk. The biggest risk of a new technology is that you get left behind as a worker or as an employer or as a company. You get left behind. That is risk number one on the downside. You believe so much of the fear that you don't embrace it all, and therefore you get left behind. Second fear on the hype side is you embrace too much hype and you lose money on it. You lose time, you waste, you get shiny object syndrome, right? Those are our two true risks of ChatGPT. My goal is to navigate my way through this mess of fires on both sides and come out on the other side with the highest reward with the least amount of damage. That's literally my goal in how to do this. And so that requires me to say, how is this going to impact my business? How is it going to impact the competitive landscape, my market share? How's this going to impact my industry? How's this going to impact my own job or the jobs of my employees, etc., and try to navigate through that cycle. Now, what should we do about it? As organizations, most likely if you're on this webinar, I'm going to guess you're not a giant company. You're not Goliath. You're not at the top. You're not building AI, and you're not the ones that like have the most money, the biggest brand, all that kind of stuff. I'm going to assume that you're more David than Goliath, kind of like me. And so you look at that and go, well, we don't have the money to waste on hype that doesn't come true. And we don't have the money to waste or the ability to put our heads down and be afraid and do nothing because we're going to end up getting left behind and unable to catch up. That's what it is. Unable to catch up. We need to plot this course through the mill. So today, what we're going to talk about is creating a policy about ChatGPT in your workplace, but more importantly, creating an approach, a plan of attack. You shouldn't be looking at this like it's sexual harassment. Like we create a policy, we put in place, we check off the box, and it checks down our hey, it will still happen, but at least we have a policy, so if we get sued, we're not in trouble. You can't think, even though we're using a policy word, which sounds like that type of stuff, that's not the way you should think about it. You've got to think about it more like this is a major black swan event that's coming. This is a major evolutionary event in the business world, and we need to evolve as it evolves. We need to mature as it matures. Our policy, our process, our approach should match the maturity of the technology we're talking about. We don't want our policy to be more mature than it, or that means we're restricting things that we don't know what we don't know. We don't want it to be less mature because it means that we aren't properly covering our risks and we aren't properly insuring. And by risk, I mean both risk like negative security risk and as well as risk of like being left behind. So how do we approach it? Number one, you need more than just a policy. So by default, a ChatGPT policy, there's tons of them out there. I can get you a link. You can go Google it. SHRM has a default policy. There's about 10,000, or you can literally log into ChatGPT and have it write you a policy. Most ChatGPT policies are going to, well, let's talk about what they are today. In most companies, it's one of two things. Policy number one is we locked everybody up. We're afraid of the risk, and we have no frame of context or frame of reference to even know what the risks are. So let's just lock everybody out. That has been a lot for big organizations. For small, they just lock everybody out. That's not the right approach. Approach number two is we have no policy. It's the Wild West. That's also not a great policy. Not just because it's risky, but it also is risky that you're not actually taking it serious. You're not collaborating on it. You're not figuring it out as a team. You're not adjusting and evolving it. Neither of those are the right way. So by default, a policy should have these three things right off the bat. Number one, what's allowed or what's not allowed. Hey, we don't upload our personal identifiable information into ChatGPT. We don't upload it in the same way you would say you don't load it up into Google. You don't put it out there in the public space. Like you ensure that if information is private, secret, proprietary, that it's protected in some way before you load it into it. That doesn't mean that ChatGPT can't be trusted with it. OpenAI might be able to be trusted with it. Other AI platforms. It just means, hey, this information is important enough, valuable enough to our organization that we have to have talked through it before we go. So this is kind of like the don't go without permission. Number two is what is desired. What is desired is, hey, these areas over here, we've already validated that they're good areas. We should be putting our efforts into them. Validated they're good, meaning the risk is low, but also the reward is high. Then the third one, what's required. Hey, if you're going to do this, or if you're going to not do this, here's what's required. It's required that you ask permission. It's required that you show your work. It's required that you share what you're doing. If you don't do that, your employees are going to use it anyway. Just so everybody knows, like not having a policy doesn't mean it's not used, and telling everybody they're restricted doesn't mean it's not used. Like that's just we've been getting around technology blocks in organizations forever. Like they go home. This is what I've heard from a whole lot of people as well. My company blocked it, so I have to go home and use it on work. So, but what this leaves out is the maturity and evolution of the process. It leaves out why are these things not allowed and why are these things allowed. It leaves out how do we go about deciding which one it is and evaluating these things and who should be doing it and when they should be doing it. It leaves out the serious nature of this evolution and us actually taking it serious, that we are maturing as it matures. By just saying, don't do this, do this, here's what's required, it basically treats our team and employees like they're idiots, like they need to be commanded around. And more importantly, it opens us up for the fact that we're going to get left behind. We're going to be out of date. We're going to those things. So this is the first part. Understand, yeah, you can put a policy in place and have your employees sign or whatever. I can tell you especially in the 50 to 5,000 employee space, not a lot of companies have this. I know because I managed the onboarding process at one of my companies for like 1,000 companies, and not a single one of them has new hires signing anything about generative AI. I believe it's because they don't know what they don't know. They don't know even who to go to talk to about. So what it should look like is this right here. Number one, we put a standardized, immature, imperfect, but starting point policy in place. And then we run this loop. We look at where the opportunities are. We prioritize those opportunities or risks. This is just SWOT analysis 101. We look at our opportunities. We look at the threats. We identify and prioritize which threats we need to take seriously and figure out which opportunities we need to take seriously. We then implement, whether that's implementing a process where we will use it here, or implementing in our policy a you do not use it. And by implementation, I don't mean adding it to the policy. The policy is actually the least important part of this whole entire thing. When I say policy, I don't mean a piece of paper. What I mean is that it's a policy that your team actually understands and is reviewed with them, not just a one-time thing. But we implement those things, then we evaluate them. Hey, did that work? Is that right? We get feedback from our users, from our team, from the people doing it, and then we synergize. We ensure that this is working across different departments as we adjust it. It becomes this progressive approach to it, and we just keep running this loop. Our goal is to put in place not a policy, but an approach that ensures that as these technologies evolve and as they mature, that we will evolve along that same line. Not too much into the hype, not too much into the fear, not too much gas, not too much brake, just the right amount. Think about this like surfing a wave. A little too much on the front, we go nose over. That's too much gas. A little bit too much on the back, we go too slow. Wave passes us. Now our goal is to ride the wave. We're looking for the sweet spot in the wave, right? And so that really is the way to think about it. This wave is these generative AI platforms, and our goal as a business is to ride right there along with them. It requires us evolving the way that they're evolving. So how do we analyze the risks? So I've taken and looked through all different types of risks and worries and stuff, and you can kind of sum them up into these two core areas. Number one on the front side is we need to ask ourselves, before we put information into a generative AI platform, and you would say the same of loading it up on a website or putting it on Reddit or putting it anywhere in the public sphere or anywhere that we don't control, how private and secret and proprietary is the information we're going to put into it? That's question number one. You can rate this like it's a temperature gauge. On the top would be our top secret proprietary approach to doing things. It would be our trade secrets. It would be the personal identifying information like social security numbers or our client list. Like that would be at the top. And as you come down this, we get something say like marketing content and our culture and values and our job ads and what we have to offer as an employer and what our different employees do. That stuff that will end up being publicly posted on our website and job boards and Google, well, it's green. Now, why do we want to rate it this way? Well, it's really simple. Our goal with our team is to teach them how to understand the potential of the value of that information, so that they then know what to do next. So that they know, hey, I'm all in on this, it's green. Hey, it's yellow, I need to remove certain things. Say like, I'm going to upload the resumes of my team. I can remove their contact info, but upload the rest of the resume. That just lowered a yellow to a green, right? I know, hey, I'm not going to do that. Hey, I need to ask permission. Hey, I should just totally stay away. You hit into the red areas and you're like, hey, I should tell somebody to make sure this goes into our policy. How private, secret, and proprietary is the information you're putting in. It also could be, hey, I need to not use ChatGPT. I need to use some other version through their API where there's restrictions on what information, how this information is used. There are ways to change your usage of generative AI to be more private and more secure for your company. Now that's the first part. Now the second part is on the backside, is how important is the accuracy and how widespread will this information be distributed. Both of these could be said if we swapped out AI in here for a new hire. you would be having the same conversation. If we bring in a new hire, we're going to say, hey, this information that we're providing you on day 1, day 5, day 10, day 30 of your work here, we don't quite trust you in giving you our most private, secret, and proprietary information yet, not because we think you're going to do something bad with it, but because you don't know the protocol for how we do this. So we start them at the bottom and work their way up. AI should be the same way. Now, on the flip side, how important is the accuracy of the information? This one is the echoes of inaccuracy, the stuff that you're going to hear about on the news. And the easy way to think about this is, how important is it to be accurate, not misleading or not misstated? And more importantly, the person who's using it, do they have the ability to decide whether it's right or wrong? So let's take this as a great example. Now, and the last part is, how wide will the distribution be? The higher this is up on the scale, it doesn't mean don't do it. Once again, it means we need validation or an editor or proofreading or that kind of stuff before we send it out. We need human intervention. And human intervention, both from hey, ChatGPT shouldn't be interfacing with our clients directly, because we need human intervention of somebody proofing it, all the way up through, even if a human's doing it, we need another human to validate that part. That is the risk on the backside. Now, why is this so important? Well, you don't need to do everything all at once. Just because somebody says it could do something doesn't mean that you should be trying that first. We want to start with green. So let me give you 2 examples so that you can see that this is a little bit about analyzing the risk and then picking the low-hanging fruit. Example number 1 would be, imagine that you have a serious case of a breach of security at work, a breach of your proprietary information or something like that, and you want to know how to go about suing somebody for it. So you go to ChatGPT and you load up all the information of what's going on, the specifics of the case. Hey, pretty much, you just crossed some huge lines. You went with red on the left. Number 2, you then ask it to make legal arguments for you. You're not a lawyer. You have no ability to confirm the accuracy of what's coming back. That situation right there is really simple. Don't call ChatGPT, call your lawyer. The risks are way too high and the rewards are way too low of not just talking to a lawyer. It would have cost you $500 to have attorney-client privilege and to get back information from somebody who knows what they're talking about. Now, on the flip side, let's say that we said, hey, we're spending a lot of time writing job ads. We want to write more engaging job ads. We need to do recruitment marketing for our company, right? We're wanting to create job target personas and new engaging ads and screening questions and correspondence and email blasts and social media shares and posts about our job that we have open in order to attract the best people into this job. We want to create career pathways to explain to them all that good recruitment marketing type content. Well, it's either public information already, it will be public, or more importantly, it's not that important. It's not that secret or proprietary. Therefore, it's green on the left. On the flip side, the accuracy and how widespread. The accuracy isn't about right or wrong. It's about, is this true for us as an organization? Are we that type of company? Do we offer those types of benefits? Is this what it's like to work for us? That's accuracy that I would assume whoever's writing that ad now would be able to read the information coming back and say, yes, it's good, or no, it's not, and adjust it or edit it. Therefore, it can easily be made green. So where should you spend your time? The top one might save you some legal costs, but the risks are really high, so I wouldn't do that one. The bottom one, the last example I just gave you, like, it's the risks are low, but the potential rewards isn't just saving us time doing that, but potentially increasing the engagement and the type of candidates we're going to pull into the process, and our ability to make the communication more engaging, more personalized, etc. The same thing would be said if we were talking about marketing or sales, green, right? But using ChatGPT to upload proprietary information and having it brainstorm a new drug, a new process, a new invention, something like that, that sounds like red. And so, as you can see here, I'm deciding the level of use of ChatGPT paired up with my team. I am not at the point at all, I can tell you, in any of my organizations, where I'm literally having it replace a team member that with no oversight, no engagement, no review, nothing like that. So hopefully this makes sense as far as how to analyze it. So what this basically says is now that we've analyzed it, we need a pragmatic approach. It's the how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time, right? And that really is the goal. We have our policy in place. We now need to take and say, but we should focus on the stuff. We still have a business to run. We still have our normal processes to run. Hopefully AI is going to come in and make us more efficient, make us more effective, make it more engaging. But in the meantime, we're running a balancing act of continuing to do what we need to do, plus embedding, integrating this new technology in. And so prioritization and agile type projects are the way to go. If you think about the Pareto principle, 80% of the outcome is going to come from 20% of the effort. What that means in this instance is 80% of the value you're going to get from generative AI is going to come from 20% of the use cases. Your job is to identify which use cases are most likely in that 20%, number one, and number two, to execute them as small projects where you can test and validate and learn as you go so that you don't invest. The way to think about waterfall versus agile is to think about the health insurance marketplaces that were built. Go back to where those were rolled out, regardless of whether you're a Democrat or Republican, it doesn't matter. But the actual building of those marketplaces was done as a waterfall approach. We're going to spend $1 billion or hundreds of millions of dollars, and we're not going to actually test it or see it work until the end when it's too late if it's broken. That's not the type of project you want to do with your business. Instead, we want these small projects. Hey, let's go and rewrite one job ad. Let's see how it worked. Let's get it live. Let's get feedback from our users or from our employees. Let's post it and see if it gets more applicants. Hey, this was better. Let's now rewrite more job ads. Hey, let's either continue to extend the depth we go with it of digging deeper and deeper in that one job vertical, or let's expand the breadth of it. Let's use it on more of similar activities. That's the way that you have to think about the project management of this piece. We want to take all these different areas, whether we start with departments, that's where I start at the top. I start at the company, I look at the departments or our missions, and I try to plot them on this course. Which ones are in green? Which ones have the highest reward with the least risk? Which ones are easiest to get to the most likely positive impact? Green. The red ones go in the, hey, don't do this. The yellow and greens go in the, this is the middle ground. We should come back and look at it when we're done with the high green things. You'll start at the department level, then you take each department, plot the same thing, where of all the different processes, of all the different things going on, which ones are most likely green. Let's start with those. Which ones are most likely red? Let's put those in the policy of do not go there. Which ones are in the middle? Let's put a pin in those. We'll make a list of them. We'll come back and look at them every month and decide, can we turn these into green ones, right? If you think about the two favorite places I have to start on this, again, it's going to be anywhere where there is human-to-human interaction. So my two favorite places, the customer journey, that means marketing, sales, new client onboarding, client customer service, customer success, expansion, anything along those lines. The reason why is because as soon as you create content, it's going to go public, which means the secrecy proprietary thing is not as big of a deal, number one. And number two, has the most potential impact on the upside, where we spend a lot of time writing responses to emails, creating content, all through these touch points. The best way I like to think about it is anywhere there's a touch point, that's a communication. And ChatGPT is amazing at assisting teams with their communication, right? We could also look at the same way and say, well, the employee journey looks just like the customer journey, from recruiting and hiring to onboarding to training to developing our team to progression to creating career paths for them to engaging the team to getting alignment around culture and values and mission to brainstorming projects to, you name it, exit interviews, all that kind of stuff. Once again, all of this has a whole lot of back and forth interaction and communication, which means a lot of content is required. And so these are the two easiest areas to focus on that give us the biggest bang for our buck, that have the most likely reward with the lowest amount of risk, that have the ability to get our feet wet without freaking out, that have the ability to pair our team with these tools. And so we want to look at the different areas of these and rank them and say, well, the easiest thing for us to do to start off would be to write some blog posts and come up with some new sequences for our sales team and make them more personalized or segmented, or map out a new client 90-day sequence of emails, or the same thing on the employee side, new job ads and better screening questions and behavioral interview questions and correspondence and offer letters and all that, onboarding training and, a series of email about our culture and our values and our mission and our backstory. All of those areas are the easiest place to start, where you really can make a huge impact. So how do you go about doing this? If you think about the first one, you do a pilot program. What Agile is just doing a bunch of little science projects, a bunch of little pilot programs. So teaching your team how to go about doing a pilot is the best way to teach them how to approach it in an Agile way. To be able to say, okay, we've got all these opportunities. We've ranked them by our priorities. We've looked at them based off of how nasty could it be, what's the potential impact, what's our certainty that it will work, how easy will it be. We've ranked it by department, by area, so we know which department to focus on first. Inside the departments, we've ranked all their processes in that same green structure. We know what processes to look at first. We've gone through the process and looked at the different areas where we create content, where we brainstorm, where we do those types of things. We prioritize them. Cool, we have a pilot project, or we have the project to work on today, in this sprint. If we were doing Agile, it would be in the next 2 weeks, we want to do this project. And so at that point, we can run this very much like a science project at school. We define the objective. Our goal is to see how ChatGPT could be used in this process to make it more efficient, more effective, and more engaging. Those are our three pieces, right? By engaging, I mean more personalized, more relevant, more compelling to whoever's reading the content. Number two, we outline all the different tasks that are there and say, here's what we should do in the order we're going to do them in. We figure out how to get the data. Usually this would say data, but in this instance, it's input, because sometimes data makes us think it's numbers. Input might be, hey, we need the current questions from clients. Hey, we need, excuse me, our current job ad. We need our resumes of the people we love in this role so that we can use them. We need to gather this information that is the context of where we're at today. We're not just going to jump into ChatGPT and throw a prompt at it. We need to actually give it context, just like it was a new hire doing a new project. Before we had them start writing something or doing something, we would gather together and give them access to the information that is the basis of the project. At that point, we can train ChatGPT. Now, training ChatGPT is effectively loading up in the conversation thread the context we want. And I'll show you in a second here what that means. Actually, let me just open up ChatGPT really quick, and I'll show you exactly what I mean by that. When I'm training ChatGPT, if I start with just this open box and I say, I need your help, writing let's say that we're going to create a training webinar about creating a ChatGPT policy for employers, right? Now, I could start from here. At this point in this brand new conversation thread, I'm relying completely on the training of its own language model. That means that I've given it a one-sentence request. Imagine that you hired a brand new employee or a brand new consultant. You gave them one sentence of a job and said, I need you to go and do this thing. You gave them absolutely no backstory, no context, no vision for the future. No, this is what success looks like. This is what failure looks like. No rules, no guidelines, no nothing. You literally just said, hey, based on this one sentence, figure it out on your own. This is one of the areas where people say ChatGPT comes back with bad information. And the answer is you didn't give it a good starting point. When we're training ChatGPT, it's about giving it a starting point, a base level of context, right? This is what we would call a simple prompt. That's terrible, unless you want back a simple answer, right? While this is an answer, it's overly vague, it's overly generic, it doesn't have meat on the bone. So when I'm back here saying I need to gather all this stuff and train it, then that means in this conversation thread, I need to load information into this thread that we will be using on the project. Now, one great way to do it, if you don't know what to feed it, would be something as simple as, and this is like the number one hack to teach your entire team. If this was a consultant, I would assume the consultant knows what it needs to know. In this instance, I have to prompt it to become a consultant. I want you to act as a consultant to help our team customize and personalize our approach to ChatGPT policy for work and our roadmap or plan of attack for how to evolve it to minimize our risks while maximizing our potential gains from integration throughout our team. Right? So now I've given it clear instructions. Hey, this is how I want you to act. That's what we'd call a more complex prompt. But I want to actually get into a more collaborative situation here. And so in order to collaborate, I would simply say, what would you need to know? Our company, our business model, our industry, our processes, etc., to help us make this better, right? Now I've just started collaborating. This becomes a thread. I'm going to save this thread. I'm not going to delete it. I'm going to come back to it. You see, now it's actually telling me, hey, if you give me, going back to our piece, if you give me this input and train me on it, then when we actually get into running the project, we'll actually be collaborating. So it's going to give me a whole bunch of questions. I could actually just hit record on Zoom and record these and transcribe them and put them in. I could use otter.ai to transcribe all this information. I could feed it all back in. Now, if I'm just typing it, I'm most likely my team's going to minimize the amount of context it gives. And that's why I suggest recording it, transcribing it, and feeding the transcript into it. Because if you provide, so this basically just told us the 9 areas of information that we would want to train this one string on, that would then make it so that when we start saying, hey, help us design this policy, hey, help us design the process, hey, help us design X, Y, and Z, design how to go about it, etc., etc. If you want to see what this should look like, I could say, could you create a list of template? We'll go, imagine that you are the CEO of a SaaS platform for hiring that has 100 employees and 5,000 clients and competes for small business in the home repair and service space. Please answer the questions above, right? And so this will show you what it's expecting to get back. This is also a good way to have it draft and then you can edit it. So this is the kind of information. Now, the reason why I didn't just say, please go ahead and create a ChatGPT policy for a small SaaS company that blah, 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 is I actually want to see what assumptions it's making. In this instance, I now could take and adjust these assumptions, feed them back in and say, based off of this, now let's go do something. And so in this instance, we're seeing, hey, this is a little bit more complicated than just buying a list of prompts and throwing it at it. There's no wonder that maybe our team is getting back information that's not as good, or the people are saying, hey, it's not as accurate as it should be, or hey, it would have been faster for me to do it myself. If you hear that feedback, it is not the tool, it is the user. ChatGPT is a magic wand. It's only as good as the wizard, their knowledge of how to use it, what it can do, that type of thing. And that's the best way to think about it. Excel has the ability to do amazing things and not work at all, not depending on Excel, but depending on the power and skills and experience of the user. And so that's the way to think about ChatGPT in this instance, this is a much more collaborative and advanced way to use it. It's thinking about ChatGPT not like it's Google, but like it's an actual collaborative tool, like it's a consultant. That's the best way to think about it. Each of these areas over here on the left, all the different chat strings for me, those are all subjects similar to like a Slack thread, where I'm on a subject working on a given thing with ChatGPT. And so that's the way to think about this setup. Once we've got this top part, effectively, we've said, okay, we've defined the objective, we've created the tasks or outlined the task, we came up with the information or the data to load it, we trained ChatGPT. This pilot testing here is where we'd actually run the prompts and run the project to create the content, to create a job ad, to create a marketing scheme, to create a policy, whatever the case may be. This top part is about defining the objective and getting to the point where stuff is coming back from ChatGPT. The bottom part is where we actually take and go, okay, so let's get some user feedback. Let's actually review it. Let's review it with our team. Let's show it to a client or a prospect or a job seeker or an employee. Let's get feedback. Let's actually look at the results and evaluate, did this do what we want it to do? Or do we need to go back and adjust it and iterate it before it becomes part of our documented process? Top area is preparation and that kind of getting to the point where we've created something. Bottom area is validation, feedback, and adjustment. This is what it looks like to run a science project. When you get to number 10 here, you'd most likely come back here, grab another project to start over again. Or you would come back here, adjust your approach, and run it again. Hey, we've got a new objective. We liked what it did, but we wish it was more X. We're going to run a new project. This is just a cycle that we repeat over and over and over and over again. Think about the way that Thomas Edison created the light bulb. If that took 10,000 tries, trust me, he didn't start from zero each time. Each time he was progressing his knowledge, his experiment, he was building on the past stuff to get better and better and better. Each time he would learn something, evolve something, change something, learn what to do more of, what to do less of, etc. And that really is the way to run this type of stuff, that we are running these projects. We learn, we run it live, we say don't do that, we adjust our policy, we do the next project, we do the next project. Aim small, miss small is really the way to think about it. You will get much faster at 1% growth day over day than you will at trying to do 100% growth in a 6-month project. And that really is the way that Agile approaches something like this, and the way that you need to approach it, because once again, you're trying to mature your process, your policies, your plays, all the things, your team, at the same rate as the maturity of the platforms you're potentially using, as the maturity of generative AI. A great area to look at for me, again, because this is most likely in your HR, or you have something to do with talent. The talent engine, that customer journey is a great place to start. It has all these opportunities for content, whether it's job ads, whether it's employee journeys, whether it's career paths, whether it's interactions back and forth between job seekers or employees, or you name it, teams. This is a great place to start. But the key here being, don't overthink your choice. Just pick something. Pick a project. Literally sit down and say with your team, what's something where we type for more than 20 words in a row? Let's try using ChatGPT to help us draft the first draft. Something as simple as that, where once again, we've identified low risk for the information we're putting in, at least high level of ability to proof it. And let's get started with something. That's really the way to go. Each of these steps, if you think about recruiting, once again, I know we've got somebody here who does employment recruiting specialist. There's so much content created throughout the recruiting process that right now isn't very good. It's not very engaging. It's not very personalized. It's not very segmented, because it would take us a lot of time to type up 5 different versions of our job ad based off of 5 different personas. ChatGPT is going to eat that stuff for breakfast. And so that gives us a way to think about this one piece right here. Most people, whether this is in the customer journey or the employee journey, we assume that software, we just need the right tool. We just need to blast it out to more people. We just need more money with more ads, etc. That is a scaling function. but that's going to scale whatever your current situation is. Give you a good example. If you write a terrible ad, but then you pay more money to advertise it, you're just scaling a terrible ad. You're better off starting with creating better content, more engaging content, better conversion before you scale. Nail it, then scale it. And for the most part, whether it's in marketing or sales, whether it's in recruiting or onboarding, whether it's in training or employee engagement or performance, we have gone to the scale, the tools, without ensuring that our content, our approach, our paradigm was good. And so we're just scaling bad stuff. So I've walked through a couple different examples here to kind of show you how I would run this flow, whether it's in, sorry, I got to make sure that there we go. And I'd be more than that. I've got videos with more of these examples that I'll send out for attending the webinar, and you can walk through one at a time. But really, this is about mentally walking through the example first on your own. And then if you want again, lowering the risk, walk through the example. If my task was, I'm about ready to hire a bunch of people, I want to make sure that there's in 90 days, they become not just know how to do their job, but we want them to actually understand our company, our origin story, our mission, our values, our culture, our core values, the way that we see the world, the way that we approach things. That would be a great objective. I want to create a program to disseminate all this information into our new hires. Yes, their manager is going to teach them how to do the individual tasks they were hired to do, but actually teaching them about the broader context of our organization most likely isn't happening. That is holding back your organization because your employees aren't able to make good decisions. They're making mistakes. There's a lack of alignment because they don't know what they don't know. And so that's a great objective to define. We're going to figure out a way to educate our team and give them the context in 90 days. We can look at the task of creating content and, outlining what needs to know, gathering that knowledge, creating the content, and then sending a structure to distribute that content, such as email drip campaigns, right? And so, yeah, it's exactly right. Like this is like, so you look at that input collection. Well, we probably need to interview our team. Let's hop on Zoom. Let's interview them. Once again, ask ChatGPT, I want to create this project. Create a list of interview questions. It will create it. Now go do the human interaction. Like go and actually interview. In a couple hours, you could interview on Zoom and gather information about your culture, your values, your process, your origin story. Feed that back into ChatGPT to train it, which then lets you run the pilot. Will let you say, okay, I'm going to run these prompts. A pilot would be in the same way thinking, create my first draft. Create a series of 10 emails that talks about our culture, our values, our mission, our origin story. Write the first draft of it. Do I like that? No. Change the tone of voice, change whatever. Use the transcript from my interviews to create it. Now, at that point, I've now created this. I could easily take it in a Word doc, show it to some people, who are new hires and say, hey, did we teach you any of this stuff? Show it to people who've been with you for a year or 2 years and say, is this stuff accurate? Number one. Number two, do you wish you'd known it? That's a big one. Do you wish you'd known? And that's one of my questions in my interviews. If I'm doing this with a new hire training program, an alignment program, I'm going to go to people we hired a year ago who have been successful and say, what do you wish you'd known in the first 90 days? What do you wish we'd told you? What do you wish, what kind of context, what information about our origin story, our industry, our competitive landscape, our product, our customers, our values, our paradigm, the way that we go about things here. What do you wish you'd known? That information, you feed it back into ChatGPT and then say, let's educate people on this on day one, drip by drip by drip, not fire hose with an orientation, although you could do that. You could use that information to help you outline your orientation meeting, but you also use it to create a drip sequence of emails to drip out over 90 days or 100 days. And that gives you this ability to look at it instead of saying, well, we'll load it in, and if you want to ask the question, it's there. You could create a chat bot with this information, but that still relies on the employee taking the initiative of asking the question. Instead, looking at it and saying, how do we make it so that it's happening proactively towards them? Email is almost always going to be my go-to on that. I'm going to create, because email is my go-to when I'm engaging you as a prospect or as a client. And so I'm going to treat my employees like they're my new clients. And I'm going to drip this content out to them. It doesn't mean that we don't do meetings. It doesn't mean that we don't do training. It doesn't mean we don't do orientations. It's just that the fact that the human brain needs to hear it multiple times, especially when we're overwhelming them with information in a high stress environment, i.e. a new hire, right? And so this gives you that place to come, okay, now we're going to look in 90 days, we could run this drip. We could look at that and say, are these employees better informed about our company now than they were the last time around? In a simple survey to our managers, get a yes or no. That gives me the feedback. I could ask questions. I could ask for feedback, go back and evaluate and say, I love this. Let's do it for a new job. Let's do it for a different department. Or, hey, we're going to iterate this. Let's run a new project where we adjust it, where we turn this content into a podcast, where we turn it into videos, where we turn it into, whatever the case may be, where we take level one that might have just been plain text, we turn it now into audio or into video. And so you can see we're just continuing this cycle of constant improvement, knowing that we're never going to get done because it's going to continue to evolve. The technology, the tools, everything going on is going to keep evolving. Now, just as we finalize here and kind of talk through this last part, how can we help? Most likely, I hope that you're looking at this and saying, oh my gosh, this was a ton of information. This really will help me out, but I don't know what I don't know. And that is where most organizations are at. You have domain knowledge about your company, about your processes, about your team, but you don't have knowledge about all the potential that ChatGPT could do and all the risks. And so when you think about moving fast with fewer mistakes, this is where bringing in help, it will help you along the way. It will speed up your progression and make you, it's kind of like putting the bumpers on when you're bowling with your kids, right? Lowering the risk and increasing the speed to reward is a great way to think about it. There's three main ways that we help organizations. Individually, we can help them with the individual adventure as far as how would I use this as an HR person professionally? How would I use this as a salesperson professionally, as an executive? That kind of, how do I use it in my own role? We have great programs to help train and provide that type of stuff. Number two, pilot projects. Even though it seems simple to boil it down, running that project in an agile way, if your team isn't experienced with that or doesn't have kind of a tour guide there, great way that we can come alongside and help. And then finally, company policy and plan. We can actually do it's almost like an audit where your company is now, audit your departments and your processes and help you get to the point of here's a great policy to begin with. Here's a plan of attack for them to implement it. Here's how to train our team on it. It's almost like a facilitator in an engagement consulting type setup. And so these are the three ways that we help organizations to engage, to help you to lay out the roadmap, put the policy in place, prioritize your things, and then execute at least these initial kind of agile sprints, these initial loops of value, so that your team can see exactly how it works without them all showing up going, nobody knows what we don't know, and we're afraid or it feels risky to go forward. The goal there being to get us to results as fast as possible. So we'd be more than happy to help you out with this. We'd love to hear from you. If you have any questions, I'll be following up via email. I'll send out a copy of this deck. I'll send out some links to some of our other videos that can help you progress along the way. But if you have any questions, feel free to shoot me an email or respond to that. If you'd like to learn more, I've got a recording of a session rat. So I'll get the recording out. I'll get the deck out. I'll also give you some links to some other additional resources of what to watch next in different areas of the talent engine or whatever the case may be. And again, if you have any questions, please feel free, shoot me an email. I'd love to hear from you. Otherwise, we'll talk to you again in the future. Thanks so much for attending, you guys.